We are walking through the doors of a house that, depending on who you ask, I guess, is either completely not sane or just very, very hungry.
Yeah, hungry is a good word for it.
We are talking about The Haunting of Hill House. And for you listening, we're not just recapping a scary story today.
No, definitely not, because
Right.
we're not just looking at one Hill House. We're actually looking at two distinct entities today.
Right.
They share a name, they share a skeleton, but they possess very, very different souls.
Exactly. So to set the scene for you, we've got the artifacts right here on the table. On one side, we have Shirley Jackson's 1959 classic novel.
The absolute gold standard of Gothic horror.
Yeah, and psychological ambiguity for sure. And then on the other side, we have Mike Flanagan's 2018 Netflix adaptation, which it basically took that framework and built something entirely modern.
It's such a fascinating comparison, because usually when we talk about adaptations, we're just checking boxes.
Like, did they keep this specific scene or...
Right. Or did they change that character's hair color? That kind of thing. But here, our mission is completely different.
We really want to uncover how these two works use the exact same haunted house framework to tell, honestly, completely different stories about gender and trauma and the human mind.
Precisely. We are looking at the architecture of the horror.
I love that phrase, the load-bearing walls of fear.
Yeah, exactly.
So, let's start with a little context, because the origin story of the novel itself is kind of amazing.
It is.
Shirley Jackson didn't just wake up one day and decide to write a ghost story out of nowhere. The sources point out that she was actually reading reports by 19th century psychic researchers.
Right, these very dry, very clinical reports about supposed hauntings.
Yeah.
And what she found interesting wasn't the ghosts themselves. The reports were apparently incredibly boring.
Which is hilarious.
It is. She was actually fascinated by the researchers.
Just these earnest, misguided people.
Right. Determined people who were hunting for something that might not even be there.
Which is such a funny entry point for what became one of the scariest books ever written. Like, she found the ghost hunters boring, so she wrote a book about how messed up they are in the head.
And that leads directly into Jackson's central dilemma. She stated that to write a ghost story, she had to hit reality head on. She famously said something like, either I have to believe in ghosts, which she claimed she did, or I have to write a different kind of novel.
She fully leaned into the reality of it. But then you have this massive adaptation shift, because when Flanagan came along in 2018, he didn't just update the clothes and the setting.
No, he fundamentally changed the core dynamic.
Right. In the novel, you have this group of strangers.
Brought together by a doctor, Dr. Montague.
Yeah, it's an experiment. They don't know each other.
But Flanagan shifts that entirely. He changes the focus from a group of strangers to a nuclear family, the Crains.
And that one change, it alters everything about how the horror operates, because it changes it from a story about isolation, which is what the Jackson novel is, to a story about inheritance.
Family inheritance,
Yeah.
exactly.
So let's really unpack that. Because going from strangers to family brings us to our first big topic for this deep dive, which is the architecture of fear. Specifically, this massive battle between ambiguity and literalism.
This is really the crux of the difference between the two artifacts.
Right.
In Jackson's novel, the central tension you're feeling the whole time is this question. Is the house haunted, or is Eleanor Vance just losing her mind?
Eleanor being our main protagonist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the supernatural events in the book, they are often described so vaguely. They're partly hidden from the characters.
Yeah, you get banging on doors or cold spots.
Right, but you rarely ever see a ghost in the traditional movie sense.
It's all about what's happening inside their heads, which I think brings us to Freud. Because the sources argue you really can't analyze Hill House without bringing in the Freudian concept of the uncanny, or das Unheimliche.
Very nice pronunciation.
Thank you, I practiced. But what does it actually mean in this context? For you listening, the uncanny is basically when something familiar becomes terrifyingly strange.
Exactly. It is the home becoming unhome.
Unhome.
Yes.
Oh.
In the novel, the house essentially mirrors Eleanor's repressed childhood trauma. She spent her entire adult life caring for her invalid mother, harboring a ton of guilt and resentment.
Right. She hated it, but she did it.
So when she gets to Hill House, the house isn't just a scary building with creaky floors. It's a reflection of her own internal guilt.
So the horror comes from her recognizing a dark part of herself in the literal walls of the house.
Precisely. And the analysis gets even deeper when we layer Jacques Lacan's mirror stage theory on top of that.
Let's get into it.
Lacan talks about how humans form their identity by seeing a reflection of themselves, recognizing themselves as a whole entity. But for Eleanor, her psyche is fractured. She is not whole.
And the house reflects that.
Yes. The text describes the house as having this non-Euclidean off-kilter architecture.
Angles that just don't add up, doors that won't stay open.
Right. That distorted architecture acts as a distorted mirror. She can't integrate her identity, so the house just bounces that brokenness right back at her.
That is so heady, but it makes total sense. If the house is a mirror and you're broken, the house looks broken to you. But there's another really interesting layer here from one of the sources we reviewed. It's a thesis from Leiden University that brings up the idea of social scripts.
Ah, yes. The wrongly assigned scripts argument.
Yeah, this was compelling. The idea is that we all operate on these scripts, like standardized chains of behaviors that society expects from us. You know how to act in a restaurant, you know how to act at a funeral.
And the argument is that Eleanor doesn't have a script.
Or she's been following the wrong one for too long. She's been the dutiful daughter, the caretaker. That was her script.
And her mother dies.
Exactly. So when she arrives at Hill House, she's desperately trying to find a new script, maybe independent woman or friend or lover, but she just fails. The thesis argues that the characters are haunted specifically because they fail to perform their expected societal roles.
So Eleanor's haunting is essentially symbolic of her deteriorating mental health because she simply cannot adhere to this new script of independence.
She doesn't know how to be a person in the world without her mother to take care of. It's really tragic.
It is.
Okay, so that's the novel. It's ambiguous, it's psychological, it's highly internal. Now let's pivot to the series. Because Mike Flanagan does not do ambiguous.
No, he absolutely does not.
He makes it explicit.
In the series, the ghosts are very, very real. They are external threats. You can see them, they chase you, they physically interact with the space.
And we really have to talk about the black mold.
Oh, the mold. Yes. This is such a brilliant visual metaphor in the show. The house is just infested with this black mold that the father keeps trying to fix, and it seems to just come from nowhere.
It's gross. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere, and it aligns perfectly with this theoretical concept called objection.
Which is Julia Kristeva's theory, right?
Yes. Objection is basically the horror of the breakdown between the self and the other. It's things like bodily fluids, decay, a corpse.
Things that remind us that our bodies are fragile meat sacks.
Basically, yes. The mold in the house is a physical manifestation of psychological decay.
So instead of Eleanor just feeling crazy internally, the house is literally rotting from the inside out right in front of them.
And so are the people. The show materializes the trauma.
That's a great way to put it. Subtext becomes text.
Right. In the book, you're constantly wondering if they are actually haunted. In the show, the Crain family is explicitly hunted by their past.
I think that's exactly why the show hit people so hard emotionally. It took all these abstract internal fears of failure and family trauma and gave them a literal face, or, well, a bent neck, which we will definitely get to.
We will.
But first, we really have to dig deeper into Eleanor, because in the novel, she is the sun that the entire solar system revolves around.
She's the absolute core. Eleanor Vance in the novel is such a fascinating character study. As we mentioned, she's this repressed spinster, 32 years old, intensely resentful of her dead mother, and just possessed of all these latent, unexpressed desires.
And there's this specific theory from the reading, the telekinetic theory, that I found so interesting.
Yes, that is probably the most popular reading of the novel outside of just a straight ghost story.
What does it argue?
The theory posits that Eleanor herself is actually causing the supernatural disturbances.
Like a poltergeist situation.
Exactly. Poltergeist activity in folklore is very often linked to repressed adolescence or young women going through puberty.
All that chaotic energy.
Right. And Eleanor is essentially arrested in her development. She's a teenager trapped in a 32-year-old's life. She has this massive subconscious rage.
So the stones falling on the roof, the insane banging on the doors.
It might just be her own repressed energy lashing out at the house and the others.
She is haunting herself and doesn't even know it.
Which is terrifying.
It really is.
Wow.
And there's this symbol she holds on to in the book, the cup of stars.
The cup of stars. This is such a crucial, quiet moment in the book.
Right. She's driving to the house. She stops at a diner and she sees this little girl. And the girl is throwing a fit, refusing to drink her milk out of a regular glass because she wants her cup of stars.
And Eleanor just connects with this so intensely. She thinks to herself, don't do it. Don't let them break you. Insist on your cup of stars.
It's heartbreaking.
And if we bring psychoanalysis back into it, Lacan again, this cup is the objet patia.
The unattainable object of desire.
Exactly. It represents a wholeness, a magical, idealized life that Eleanor desperately wants but simply cannot have. She wants to be the special girl with the cup of stars, but reality constantly crushes that dream.
And that crushing weight leads us directly to the climax of the novel, the car crash.
The most debated moment in the entire book.
Set the scene for us.
So Eleanor is being forced to leave Hill House. The other characters, especially Dr. Montague, decide she's too unstable, the house is affecting her too much, and they make her pack her car. She gets in, starts driving away, and then purposely drives her car straight into the big oak tree on the property.
And her final coherent thought is, I am home.
I am home, yes. Now, the big analytical question the sources pose is this moment a defeat or is it a rebellion?
Let's look at both sides, because the sources are split. Argument A is that it's a total defeat.
Right. The defeat argument says she is consumed by the house. She completely failed to integrate into what Lacan calls the symbolic order.
Normal society, basically.
Yes, she couldn't make it in the real world. She had no script, so she destroyed herself. It is a tragedy of failed liberation.
Which is super depressing. But then you have argument B.
Argument B is rebellion. The feminist critique often takes this angle. By dying, she claims the house. She absolutely refuses to leave.
Say I am home becomes a rejection of everything else.
Yes, a rejection of patriarchal domesticity. She consciously chooses the uncanny space, this scary, weird, broken house, over a restrictive society that literally has no place for a woman like her.
She takes control the only way she possibly can.
Exactly.
That is incredibly dark, but also kind of empowering in a really twisted way.
That is the defining beauty of Gothic horror. The line between absolute destruction and true liberation is razor thin.
Okay, let's pivot back to the series. Because in Flanagan's show, Eleanor, or Nell, as they call her, is very important. But the real center of the domestic horror, the mother figure, is Olivia Crain.
Right, the matriarch. In the series, the horror really radiates outward from Olivia. And this brings us to a major critical framework from our sources, the concept of the monstrous feminine.
This is Barbara Creed's theory, right?
Yes, it is. The monstrous feminine explores how, in horror, women, and specifically mothers, are often depicted as monstrous, but not because they are inherently evil.
It's because their maternal power is seen as threatening.
Exactly. Olivia represents the abject mother, the mother who absolutely refuses to let go of her children.
She loves them so much it becomes toxic. She wants to keep them forever.
Literally forever.
Yeah.
As the house corrupts her, she starts to believe that the outside world is a nightmare. And she believes the only way to wake her children up from that nightmare is by killing them.
Because if they die in the house, their ghosts stay in the house.
Right. She believes killing them is the ultimate act of maternal protection. She's keeping them safe and innocent within the walls forever.
Which is such a massive critique of domesticity and motherhood.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The sources connect this to Donald Winnicott's concept of the good enough mother and Elizabeth Badinter's writings on the maternal sacrifice myth.
Expand on that for us.
Society essentially demands that mothers give everything to their children. They are expected to sacrifice their bodies, their minds, their careers, their entire independent identities.
So Olivia's madness in the show isn't just a ghost story trope.
No, it's a violent reaction to the extreme pressure of being the perfect, all-sacrificing mother. She cracks under that unbearable weight.
And the show visualizes that madness with some really specific, terrifying imagery, like when she sees confetti raining down on the house.
Yes, the confetti. It's a hallucination masking a horrifying reality. She's seeing a party, but really she's setting out rat poison for the kids.
And she sees the black mold, too.
Right. Both the confetti and the mold are symbols of her mind breaking under the dual weight of societal maternal duty and the supernatural influence of the house.
It's just entirely tragic. She honestly thinks she's saving them, but she becomes the monster of their childhood.
She becomes the monster to save them from the world.
And speaking of monsters and childhood trauma, we have to talk about the bent neck lady.
We do. This is arguably the most famous, devastating twist in the entire Netflix series.
Massive spoilers ahead for anyone listening who hasn't seen it. The revelation is that the bent neck lady, this terrifying ghost with a broken neck that has been haunting young Nell her entire life, is actually Nell herself.
Nell from the future.
Yeah.
After adult Nell returns to the house and hangs herself, the show visually depicts her spirit falling backward through time. She drops through her own timeline, appearing to her younger self at her most traumatic moments.
It completely broke my brain when I watched it. But looking at the psychology presented in the sources, it's brilliant. You mentioned a term earlier, nachträglich.
Nachträglichkeit, it's a Freudian term.
Right.
It translates roughly to belatedness or afterwardness. The core idea is that trauma isn't just a single event that happens, ends, and stays in the past.
It's a loop.
It is a loop. The past constantly intrudes on the present. The original trauma is continuously reworked and re-experienced as the person grows older.
So the Betneck lady is the ultimate literal symbol of trauma loops.
She is. Nell is literally haunted by her own future trauma. But here's where the analysis gets really interesting. The sources highlight a specific theory from a Reddit discussion thread. A user named Gesund frames this dynamic beautifully.
I always love when the internet sleuths get into the deep literary analysis. What does the Reddit theory say?
The theory points out that the ghost appears specifically during moments of intense high stress for Nell. For example, when her husband Arthur suddenly dies, or when she's buying heroin for her brother Luke.
A really awful moment.
Right. And the user argues that since Nell didn't know who the ghost was, she lived her entire life in deep fear of it and actively blamed this external monster for every bad thing that happened to her.
Oh, wow. So she externalized all her bad luck and trauma onto this ghost.
Exactly. As the user points out, the Betneck lady didn't actually kill her husband. He had a brain aneurysm. It was a natural, tragic medical event. But Nell blamed the ghost.
Because it's easier.
Yes. So the ghost becomes, as they put it, a bad coping mechanism born from trauma.
That is profound. She literally haunted herself to avoid dealing with reality.
And another user in that same thread, Steel City Cynical, adds a layer to this by saying that a ghost is a wish.
A wish? How is a terrifying ghost a wish?
They argue that Nell would rather see herself suffer as a terrifying ghost than face the mundane, senseless reality of her husband dying of natural causes or her brother slowly killing himself with drugs.
It is so much easier to blame a monster than to accept the absolute randomness of tragedy.
Precisely.
Wow. So the time loop represents the fact that she never ever found peace. She was always destined to become her own nightmare, specifically because she couldn't process her grief.
The horror isn't the ghost at all, it's the grief.
That is incredibly heavy.
It is.
But I want to shift gears here to something a little different but equally important in the analysis of both works. We need to talk about the queer themes.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we have an article from our sources titled The Yassification of Shirley Jackson, which, first of all, incredible title.
It is very catchy. But the textual analysis underneath that title is very serious and robust. It focuses heavily on the character of Theodora.
Right, so in the novel, Theo is Eleanor's foil. Where Eleanor is a repressed and mousy, Theo is bohemian, she's artistic, she's vibrant, and the text heavily implies she has a female roommate back home that she recently had a huge fight with.
Right, now the 1959 novel never explicitly uses the word lesbian.
Because it's 1959.
Exactly.
Mm.
But the subtext is incredibly loud. It is practically shouting at the reader.
Which brings us to a specific scene you highlighted from the sources, the picnic scene in the novel.
This is a vital scene for understanding the queer subtext. Eleanor and Theo are walking together in the woods near the house, and they suddenly see a supernatural vision. It's a ghostly family having a picnic.
Just a normal family.
Yes. A mother, a father, children playing, a puppy. It's picturesque. It is aggressively idyllic.
And it absolutely terrifies them.
It terrifies them so much they run screaming. And the analytical question is, why? Why is a happy picnic scary? The queer reading provided by the sources suggests that it's scary not because it's a ghost.
Right?
It's scary because it represents heteronormative domestic bliss.
It's the one thing they can't have.
Or, more importantly, perhaps it's the thing they do not want. But society is constantly telling them they must want it to be normal. It represents the rigid society that ultimately rejects them. It operates as an allegory of the closet.
So the haunting for them is really the pressure to conform.
Exactly. Eleanor's terror in the novel isn't just a fear of ghosts popping out. It's the deep terror of self-discovery in a 1950s society that forces women into very tight, rigid roles.
Because if she admits she has feelings for Theo or wants that life, she loses any chance of a place in that metaphorical picnic.
Yes, she becomes an outcast.
Now, Flanagan updates this significantly because Theo in the Netflix series is explicitly queer. There's no subtext. It's just text.
She is. And the show gives her this very specific physical quirk. She constantly wears long gloves.
Because she's sensitive. She picks up emotional and psychic impressions from physical touch.
Right. But the sources look at this through the lens of queer phenomenology.
Okay, we need to break that down for the audience. What is queer phenomenology?
Phenomenology is a philosophical concept about how we experience the world around us. Queer phenomenology asks how a person's sexual orientation affects how they literally orient themselves in physical space.
How they move through the world.
Yes. So Theo's gloves physically represent her emotional barriers. Her orientation and the trauma surrounding her family disconnects her from the space around her.
She literally has to buffer herself against a world that overwhelms her.
It is a physical manifestation of keeping people at arm's length. And in the novel, the house is framed as a place where deviant women, Eleanor and Theo, are isolated away from proper society.
Right.
But in the show, the spatial thread is different. The house has the red room, which serves as a literal stomach.
A stomach. Okay, this is the perfect transition. We need to talk about the final major topic, the house as a character.
The house is undoubtedly the primary villain in both versions.
For sure. In the novel, Jackson describes it so viscerally. She says it has a face of wood that looks awake. She says right in the opening paragraph that the house is not sane.
And we talked about the queered angles, the slanted architecture that distorts perception.
Right, mirroring the crumbling mind. But in the series, the house's anatomy is centered around the red room.
The red room. It's this mysterious locked room at the end of the hall that no one can get into. But the massive twist at the end is that the characters have actually been inside it the entire time.
Which was such a good reveal. It was the treehouse for Luke. It was the dance studio for Theo. The reading room for the mom.
It specifically changed its appearance for each character. And as adult Nell realizes, it is the stomach of the house. It digests the inhabitants.
It's such a gross, perfect metaphor. The house creates a fantasy space for them. It figures out exactly what they want or need to feel safe, just so it can keep them still long enough to eat them.
And the academic sources tie this back to the feminist critique of the house as a patriarchal prison.
Let's talk about Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar.
Yes, they are famous feminist literary critics. They argue that the classic Gothic house is often a literal and figurative trap for women.
Right.
In the novel, the house seduces Eleanor specifically because she has no home of her own. She has nowhere else in the world to go.
Where the trap looks like a sanctuary.
Exactly. In the series, the house consumes the entire family to feed itself.
It all circles back to the trap of domesticity. The house just wants you to stay inside forever, keep the family together no matter the cost.
It creates a sort of phantom domesticity. It offers you a permanent home, but the price is your life.
Wow. Okay, so we've looked at the architecture, we've broken down the characters of Eleanor and Olivia, the manifestations of trauma, the queer subtext, and the stomach of the house itself. Let's bring all this analysis together and talk about the endings.
Because the endings of the two works are diametrically opposed.
Completely. Let's start with the novel. Eleanor dies alone. The book ends with the line, "Whatever walked there walked alone."
It is a profound tragedy. As we discussed, it's a failure of liberation.
Yeah.
She escapes the control of her mother, but she doesn't escape the overall pattern of domination. She just trades one master, her mother, for another master, the house.
She never gets her cup of stars. And what about the series?
The series ends very differently. The Crain children escape, mostly.
Because the father, Hugh, sacrifices his own life to appease the house and save them.
Right. And the ending voiceover flips the novel's famous opening line. Instead of whatever walk there, walk alone, the series says that those who walk there walk together.
The show asserts that love is the relinquishment of logic.
It is a much more sentimental conclusion.
But the ghosts are still there. It's not a perfectly happy ending.
No, the trauma remains. But the philosophical tone is entirely different. Flanagan is arguing that connection and forgiveness and family can ultimately save you from the void.
Whereas Jackson is arguing that some people are just lost. They're broken by the world and they don't get put back together.
That is a very stark difference. Jackson ultimately gives us the horror of the interior, the isolated mind crumbling.
And Flanagan gives us the horror of the exterior, the family unit crumbling, but then finding a painful way to hold on to each other.
But it is important to note, based on the literature, that both versions brilliantly subvert the final girl trope.
Right, the classic horror trope where the pure, innocent virgin survives by fighting and defeating the monster at the end.
Yes, neither Eleanor in the book nor Nell and Olivia in the show fit that mold at all.
No.
These women don't survive by fighting the monster. They are the story. The horror isn't the ghost jumping out of a closet. The horror is the family, the societal expectations, and the betrayals of the mind.
They center the complex female experience of trauma in a way that very few other horror stories do.
Absolutely.
You know, it's really interesting. Going through all these sources, there's this recurring underlying idea that ghosts are just things we refuse to let go of.
Which I think raises a really provocative question for you listening.
Yeah, let's hear it.
If a ghost is just a wish or a coping mechanism, or a memory that we absolutely refuse to let go of, like the sources suggest, then perhaps we're all out here haunting ourselves.
Oh, wow.
Are we the helpless residents of Hill House? Or are we the house itself? Are we
Oh,
trapping our own painful memories in a red room in our minds that we simply refuse to open?
okay, well, that is definitely going to keep me up tonight. Thank you for that deeply terrifying thought.
You are very welcome.
And that is it for this deep dive into the haunting of Hill House. For you listening, whether you prefer the ambiguous psychological chill of Shirley Jackson or the emotional visual sledgehammer of Mike Flanagan, I think there's one thing we can all safely agree on.
Stay out of the red room.
Stay out of the red room. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.